Hello, everyone, and welcome to this event. Apologies for the late start. We're delighted to welcome you to today's event on behalf of Bentham Science. Tonight's event is Building Your Academic Network, Finding Collaborators, Reviewers, and Mentors. I'm looking forward to learning something from this event myself. And who better to walk us through building our academic network, someone who is voluminously well networked himself, my friend and colleague, Dr. Gareth Dyke. Gareth, how are you today?
Doing very well, thanks, Scott. Not too bad. I wouldn't say voluminous, but that's a good word nevertheless. How's things in Tokyo? Everything going well? Nice day today?
Absolutely lovely day. It's a late spring day. It's fantastic here, just before the blast of summer heat comes. So enjoying this while we can. And hope wherever you are in the world today, I hope you're having a fantastic day. And please let us know in the chat where you're joining us from. We love to meet researchers from all around the world, from all stages of careers, from all regions all around the world. Say hello in the chat and let us know who you are and where you're joining us from.
Absolutely. I see people are already doing that. Ethiopia, Malaysia. Give us a little bit of information about yourself. Let us know maybe what you're working on, where you're from, like your area of interest. We love to get all of that kind of information, don't we, Scott, as we do these events. Oman, fantastic. Cameroon, India. Wonderful, wonderful stuff.
Wonderful. And I can see some of our return guests coming back. Thank you always for joining our events. And if you are joining us for the first time, as I know some of you are, this event is brought to you by Bentham Science Publishers. And we'll give you some information about Bentham and how to contact them in just a moment. But as you can see from the slide here, Bentham is a leading scientific, technical, and medical research publisher with more than 160 online and print journals, 126 hybrid, and 40 open access, along with more than 1,300 online and print books. And Gareth, Bentham presents a unique approach to peer review, doesn't it?
It does, absolutely. Bentham is one of the only publishers in the world that has completely blind peer review that's completely out of the control of the editors at individual journals. So when you make a submission, the editor at the journal makes an initial assessment as to whether the paper is suitable for the journal, but the peer review process is managed offline. So the editor has no control. It's entirely double-blind process. So many researchers feel that submitting to these journals is a good idea because their paper gets assessed very fairly with this double-blind process. Great to see everybody. Turkey, Brazil, Ukraine, colleagues from all over the place. Wow, such a great group we have today, Scott, for our event. Tanzania, Nigeria, Ghana, fantastic stuff.
Fantastic. Saudi Arabia. And one key point about this blinded peer review system is that it helps to offset any concerns about regional bias. And we feel very strongly about leveling the playing field for researchers around the world. We feel no matter where you are, your research deserves to be seen and heard. And Bentham obviously feels the same way. If you are interested in finding out more about Bentham, we'll put some links into the chat where you can explore more of their journal titles and learn more about their unique peer review system. Gareth, this is an important topic today, isn't it? Especially for researchers joining us from all around the world, as they are. It's important for researchers to find colleagues, mentors, collaborators, wherever they might be.
Absolutely, absolutely. Even in this day and age, with all of the different tools, AI tools, social media, a lot of what we do as researchers depends upon our skills at networking. And so, in this event, building your academic network, we're going to talk about three key elements. Initial tips for networking as a researcher to start with, but also collaborating, a very key skill, and interviewing, thirdly. People often ask, how is it possible to publish lots of research papers? Well, with AI tools to help you put papers together, it's become a lot easier. But collaboration, as we'll learn about in this event a little bit later on, is really, really, really key, right, Scott? Talking to people, sharing information, networking means that you get that bigger network as a researcher.
And hopefully it might lead to a third topic today, interviewing. Perhaps you might be discovering a new position through your growing list of contacts in your network. So I'm looking forward to this one and learning from you today, Gareth. So over to you. I'll be engaging with our guests in the chat and posting some links for people to explore as you listen. So over to you, Dr.
Let's
Dyke.
Great stuff. Let's get started. Don't forget to let us know where you're from. Give us more information in the chat. We'll have a time at the end of our event today for a Q&A, so lots of opportunity to ask any questions that may come up over the course of our event today. And thank you once again, everybody, for joining us. Thanks to our partners at Bentham Science for sponsoring this event. We'll begin with a few tips in the first part of our presentation today about academic networking, how to do it, why to do it, and what you might expect to get out of this as a process as a researcher. So let's begin. Let's have a quick think about what academic networking actually is. This is all about building lasting relationships as a researcher. So not just self-promotion, although that's important. You're going to be using your skills as a researcher, as a networker, to meet potential collaborators. And that could be co-authors, but it also, as Scott mentioned just a moment ago, could be future employers. You never know who you're going to meet when you go to conferences, when you attend events at universities, when you present your work online and offline. So all of this, it's about sharing your research and expertise with other like-minded colleagues. And as I always like to say, as we always like to say in these events, you never know where that's going to lead. I met the guy who ended up giving me my first postdoc after doing my PhD at a conference by talking to him about my research, by presenting a little bit about what I was working on to him informally. That led to a research position that set my career up going forward into the future. So networking, very important. I know it's nerve-wracking to talk to people. I know it's difficult to talk to people in professional settings, but this matters a lot in academia because, of course, as researchers, we get isolated, we get siloed within our own local research communities. So networking takes you outside of your own research team, outside of your own local network. I remember again as a PhD student in the UK, feeling, quite successful within my own network, within my own research community. Going to those first big international conferences was a real eye-opener for me because I saw that, in fact, there were many, 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 many other researchers from other universities, research groups around the world who were doing similar work and just as good, if not better. So it puts your research into that important international perspective. You get to work with colleagues from other countries, other cultures, other research areas. And of course, collaborating, as we've talked about, is super, super important. It helps you build your network, build your citations, build your research when you write papers, when you put grants together with other colleagues from around the world. But also, let's not forget about peer reviewers. You know people, you meet people, you engage with people in your research area. You can then recommend those colleagues as peer reviewers when you make your next submission. So it's important from that perspective as well. And attracting readers to your articles, the bigger your network, when you share your research on social media or talk about it on blogs or even just send your papers out to colleagues in your network via ResearchGate or academia or over email, for example, you're going to attract more readership and therefore more citations to your work. So hopefully you've been convinced so far in our event that networking is super, super important. So you build and maintain professional relationships with other researchers, academics, professionals. What about industry? What about the corporate world? What about pharmaceutical, for example, if you're working in the biological or medical sciences? This gives us, of course, the opportunity to connect, to exchange ideas and explore opportunities for mutual support. So it's all about collaboration. It's all about success. It's all about publishing. And this is what effective networking as a researcher will enable. So just a few examples of how it can work for you. Talking to people about your research in an international context is going to lead to more support, advice. You can share your work with colleagues. You can get feedback on those early stage pieces of research, those drafts, those research grants that you're putting together. And this could be formal or it could be informal. And of course, international, national, as well as local levels of networking are important, as we'll talk about in this event as we go forward. But as an early career researcher, perhaps you're listening to this and you're a PhD student just getting started. Building an international network is super, super important for you as you develop your career. Looking outside of your local networks within your local university or local research community. So these are examples of how it can help you. Networking can help you build your career and how it can work in practice. But as you may be very well aware, of course, most researchers don't do it. They don't do anything. They go to conferences. They're quite shy. They don't talk to other people. They're not pushing themselves forward. They're not sharing their research results. They're doing pretty much nothing when it comes to networking and building a community. But it's never too late to start. You know what? You can do this starting now. And we're going to have a look at how you can do that. We're going to have a look at how that can work. And don't worry, there's going to be plenty of time for questions at the end of our event today. We always leave a good chunk of time at the end of these webinars for lots and lots of questions. So you might be asking yourself, well, I'm active online, I'm active on social media, I'm networking. Surely that's enough. I'm networking online. And of course, that's one place, one community, one group of platforms where networking happens, of course, on LinkedIn, on ResearchGate, on academia, on Facebook, on Instagram, depending upon where you work, WeChat, Douyin. It depends on your local researcher network, your local community. But let's not forget about those conferences, those networking events, those chances to get connected in the real world face to face at events, at formal networking opportunities, and so on. And for researchers, of course, like us, the most important time to do this would be at when you get invited to give talks, when you get invited to attend conferences, and so on. And just like everything, just like giving a talk, just like playing the trumpet or riding a bike or driving a car, this is a skill that you can learn. It's something that you can develop as a researcher. So we like to say many of these skills are skills. They're not talents. They're things that you can develop over time. You can get better at networking, just like you can get better at giving a presentation. So with that in mind, and just to make sure that everybody's still awake, here's Scott. How are we doing so far? Scott, everything going well?
Great. Just engaging with our guests in the chat here, and just a quick invitation to post your questions in the Q&A box. As Gareth said, he's happy to take your questions, as many as we can, at the end of the event today. And if for some reason we don't have an answer for you, which is rare with Gareth because he seems to know everything, but if for some reason we happen to stump him, we'll try to get an answer for you. So feel free to share your questions in the Q&A box. But for now, we've got a quick poll. We're just curious what your preferred social networks might be. Do you use social networks to make connections with other academics? Let me just launch the poll here. Let us know which networks you are using. Select all that apply to you. Do you use ResearchGate, Academia, Blue Sky, LinkedIn, or some other social networks? Let us know.
Which ones are you on, Scott? Are you using, I know you're on LinkedIn, but are you also on Blue Sky, Academia, any
No,
of
I'm not
these?
actually. Many of my colleagues here at Waseda University are Blue Sky users. I know in my case, I spend what little time I do online on LinkedIn, I believe. So maybe I should join some more networks.
ResearchGate's a good one. I mean, I still have a profile on ResearchGate, and that looks like that's a popular platform amongst our attendees in the event today, right?
Yeah, it looks like 64% of our guests today are using ResearchGate. Let me just share the results here so you can see. 20% using Academia, 7% on Blue Sky, and 67%, just like us, using LinkedIn. And then 7% are using some other networks as well. Feel free to let us know in the chat which networks you're using or which networks you would recommend to others.
Fantastic, fantastic, fantastic. Let's move on. That's great. I'm glad to see that many of our attendees are on these different networks and you are actively getting out there and talking to people and talking about your work. So as you can see here, Academic social networks are one great way to disseminate and build an international reputation. Build your CV with little effort, sharing your research and building connections. But it's very important if you are on a platform like ResearchGate or even on your own personal website, don't upload those PDFs of your published work until after that journal embargo period has ended. Different publishers have different rules regarding when it's okay to publicly disseminate PDFs of published work. If that work is not open access, it's been published in a traditional paywall journal, you will need to check with the publisher embargo period before potentially putting it up onto an academic social network. And of course, there are many common pitfalls, a number of common problems that we do see with this happening. So hard to spot, for example, valuable posts and contact with all of the noise that we get, all of the noise that we're currently experiencing in, social media and in the networking space. It's also common for younger researchers, early career researchers, to over focus on connecting with higher profile, more senior people. And that's important, of course, but do put time into building your network of peers, your contemporary network as well. Often this feels like you're advertising. It feels a bit like you're doing a bit of the old self-promotion. Important to kind of get past that to a certain extent, and focus on connections that are meaningful. Many people, have many connections, and many of those connections aren't really leading to anything fruitful in terms of collaborations, in terms of publications, in terms of grants, and so on. So have a look at how you're doing this. We also have lots of tips to help you do this better, more effectively. Those will be coming up in a moment. But as we've talked about already, it's key as a researcher to be findable. And we talked about ResearchGate, we talked about academia a little bit, but as journals become more crowded, as more and more submissions are coming into international journals, millions each year, exponentially increasing, loads of submissions coming to journals as a result, partly of the rise in the use of AI tools for writing and publishing. It's just getting harder as a researcher to stand out and easier to be overlooked. So being findable, being uniquely identifiable helps you as a researcher, but also your collaborators and funders to discover your work. So get on ORCID. If you haven't gotten on ORCID ID, you need one. As a researcher, this means that you're immediately and uniquely identifiable to other researchers around the world. So this acts in tandem to your institutional profile, Google Scholar, ResearchGate, whatever. You can make sure that you're identifiable quickly by using ORCID and leveraging those online academic networks, engaging on LinkedIn, engaging on ResearchGate, being authentic, building an accurate and engaging profile, whilst at the same time adhering to any of your institution's policies. Different institutions, different national governments have different policies on what you can and what you should share on social networks. But what we've done here is just put together a list of the top 10. You can see that LinkedIn is not even on this top 10 list of network sites, network apps that researchers are using. Facebook, of course, Instagram, WhatsApp, YouTube, TikTok, WeChat, Telegram, Messenger, Snapchat, and so on. Very important. Where do you network? Where do you go to find networks of other researchers in your subject area? Very important question to ask. Different regions, different countries, different cultures, different subject areas will be using different applications. But in addition to online networking, of course, we'll talk about attending conferences and workshops, seeking opportunities to get funding, choosing the right event. How will you do this? Who will be there? How best to present your research at a networking event. And that is going to be part of the second component of our event today as we build our strategies for public and scholarly engagement. It's important, isn't it, to be able to explain the value of your research, to be able to justify your funding by showing the impact of your research. And as we've talked about before, you can get better at doing this. You can learn to communicate more effectively. Networking during, before, and after those all-important academic conferences. Do you, for example, participate in the event build-up? Are you online talking to other participants as the event is getting going? Are you finding out what other people going to the conference are going to be doing at the conference? Where are those fringe events, those social events? Who's going to be there? When and where? Can you get access to networking opportunities with key people in your research field? It's worth it. I never used to bother doing this. Get in touch with the conference organizers, get a list of attendees, do some background work before you go to the conference to make sure that you're going to have the opportunity to meet people that you need to meet as a researcher, to take full advantage of this opportunity. And also, the same goes for interviews. We'll talk about this in a moment as well. Follow up effectively with your new contacts after a few days max. While that interaction is still fresh, reference something specific you discussed. Keep that first message short and professional, connecting on an appropriate platform, and think about longer term collaborative relationships rather than those immediate outcomes. And we've just put together a few things here on this slide, a few tips, shows you how networking can be translated into impact. Social media attention, downloads, policies, medical practice, media attention, speaking at conferences, as well as Outmetric scores for your articles, blog attentions, and new research questions that get opened up. So do have a think about these topics as well as you put your research into those contexts and you go to conferences and you talk to people. And Scott's going to jump back in. We're going to have another quick poll at this point. Scott, how are we doing?
Doing great. I noticed that a lot of our guests today are LinkedIn users as far as the social networks go. And yet, interestingly, in that survey that we just shared, it was from 2024. I think LinkedIn was not even in the top among the top social networks for researchers. So maybe that suggests that it's growing recently as a strong network for researchers. Let's try another poll here about conferences. Gareth was just sharing some of the many benefits of networking at conferences. Let's see how many conferences our guests typically join in a year. Is it typically not many or none? Do you typically join perhaps one, two, or three or more conferences a year? Let's see what your experience is. Gareth, I know you tend to attend quite a few conferences. About how many would you say you typically attend in a
Oh, good,
year?
a good few every year, like two or three, maybe at least, like a good number. Absolutely, yeah, definitely. It's a great opportunity to meet people, great opportunity to get connected, to reconnect with colleagues, to see those old friends again. Yeah, so I'd be voting C or D maybe on this particular poll. How are we doing with our attendees?
Doing great, getting some great engagement from our guests and some questions coming in already. So we'd be happy to answer your questions towards the end of the event today. So thank you for the questions that are coming in already. Don't be shy. Feel free to share them either in the Q&A or the chat, and we'll get to as many as we can. Let's check our poll results here. Okay, great. So about 18% of our guests say typically no conferences attended in a year. 38%, excuse me, 36% said around one. 18% said around two conferences they attend per year, and three or more conferences a year attended by 28% of our guests today.
Perfect, perfect, perfect stuff. Let's move on. Let's continue with our event. Let's have a look at what we're going to be talking about next. So conferences, moving on to collaborating. And this, of course, is really, really important as we've talked about already, collaborating, working with other researchers. So let's have a little look at what this means for you as a researcher. Collaborating gives you co-authorship opportunities as well as partnerships. Mentorship, you may get access to postdoc positions, even jobs, as well as early stage support with your research, including comments on drafts, proposals, and peer review selection. As we already touched upon in our event today, networking doesn't just give you opportunities to work with other researchers, it also gives you opportunities to find people who might support you in the future with things like peer review. When you submit a paper to a journal, often you have the opportunity to put in a cover letter. you may want to put into that cover letter some information about who could be a potential peer reviewer. So the bigger your network, the more effective your research network, the more effective your peer review recommendations could also be as a researcher. So, as is well known, and as we talk about often in our events, collaboration is one of the best ways to increase your reach and citations. And you can see a number of quotes here on the screen, but more people working with you, more co-authors on your paper, more collaborators in your network, the more citations you're going to end up getting as a researcher. I'll point your attention to the quote in the middle here. International collaboration has a strong positive influence on both journal placement. So more people working in your team means better journals for your research papers, as well as citation performance in most disciplines. So this is a great thing also to think about. If you collaborate with more people, you're going to publish more papers, publish more data, share data, generate collaborations, find a mentor, become a mentor, reach more readers, and get more citations, as well as editorial board and peer review experience. Not just recommending people for your own papers, but being in those international networks means that you will potentially get recommended yourself as a reviewer for those papers. So that's also great for your international exposure and for your reputation overall as a researcher. And it's important across all of the different career stages, as we often like to talk about in these events. At early career, doing your PhD, you get to learn through collaboration, working with different people around the world, contributing to defined roles, building your confidence, and building your visibility as a researcher. In the mid-career, at postdoc stages, leading sub-projects, initiating collaborations, and balancing independence with teamwork. Whereas at the senior levels, you should, one hopes, already be a relatively experienced academic networker, but you're going to get to build strategic partnerships as well as mentoring and sponsorship, managing those research teams and managing networks. So it continues all the way through our research careers as we learn how to communicate, as we learn how to listen actively to the views and thoughts and ideas of other researchers around the world. We get more adaptable by collaborating with lots of different people. We develop our emotional intelligence and get better at giving and receiving feedback, which really is peer review. If you think about it, that's that key transferable skill that researchers do need to have, the ability to give feedback, comments on research that's been done by somebody else, as well as, of course, something that I don't have good skills in, organization and time management. But all of these soft skills, all of these transferable skills come from your exposure to other colleagues, other researchers, and networking as an overall topic in your development as a researcher. So, your visionary thinking, your communication skills, your teamwork skills, conflict resolution, empathy, adaptability, trust building, and of course, decision making are all absolutely key components of your skill set that you do develop via networking and via collaboration. So, with that in mind and thinking about collaborations, Scott, it's all about research papers, right?
Absolutely. Let's see how many collaborative or co-authored papers our guests have published. Now, this is not a quiz, it's not a judgment. We're just curious to see how you're engaging with other researchers in a collaborative sense. Let's launch our poll here. How many co-authored papers have you published previously? None so far, less than 5, 5 to 10, or is it more than 10? Gareth, I would imagine for you that number is fairly high.
Almost all of my papers, like with a few exceptions, with just a few exceptions over the years, were published with other colleagues. I'm struggling to think of more than a handful of papers that I published of the 300 or so that I ended up working on in my academic career that are just me. So it's relatively unusual for academics working in collaborative fields. I mean, you may be working in a field that is just You give us some examples of those kinds of research areas if you'd like to in the chat. But most research is quite collaborative. So, what about you, Scott? Lots of collaborations, right?
Well, in my case, I'm not really an active researcher, but as far as the publications that I have done, I can only count on one that was a collaboration. That was a conference paper and a keynote talk, and that was several years ago. So maybe I need to do more collaborations. Well, first I just have to publish more, but I have to do more collaborations and publish more.
It does help to have collaborators to kind of push you forward to get those pieces of work finished. I think that's also really an important component of collaboration. People, if you're like me and you take a long time to do some tasks, then having people pushing you a little bit is a good idea potentially.
Great. And I can see quite a lot of collaborations amongst our guests today. In fact, 42% say that they have published more than 10 collaborative or co-authored papers. So that's fantastic. Yeah, thanks everyone for sharing that information. And great to see our guests networking in the chat today. That's fantastic. It's very much in the spirit of our talk today. So thanks everyone for sharing your research work and your contact
Yeah,
information. That's
you should
great.
always feel free to use our chat as a networking opportunity. That's great. Do put your LinkedIn in there or whatever you're doing. That's fantastic.
Great.
Wonderful stuff. So, how can you identify fruitful collaboration opportunities? How can you do this effectively? Because, of course, collaboration is very worthwhile and very fruitful, but it can also be a bit of a waste of time if you're not doing it smartly, if you're not thinking about who those fruitful collaborations could be with. Because here we're bringing together different perspectives, different skills in order to achieve good outcomes. And of course, at the end of the day, as academics, to improve our research productivity. So, colleagues and students, interdisciplinary collaboration is very, very important for success, especially these days to show institutions, governments, funding agencies that you're working across different disciplines. You're not just siloed in your own research area, as well as across academic institutions in different countries and different research labs. But how can we do it in an effective way? How can we identify starting and managing our collaborations effectively? Because, as we just mentioned, not all collaborations are worth your time. So do think, is this going to be good for my career? Am I going to want to share data and resources? And there are a number of red flags that you can look at here if you are approached for collaboration or invited to participate in a project. Is my role going to be clear? What are the incentives for collaboration here? And what are the timelines like? I work with Scott, of course, we collaborate extensively. I would say that for him, a big red flag is a rushed timeline. There's just not going to be enough time for us to do a good job on this particular project, right, Scott?
I would officially say no comment, but yes.
In an academic context, if you've been invited to participate in a publication, where will you be on that publication relative to the amount of input that you're having on the project? And one great approach that you can try to determine this is what we call a SWOT analysis. Have a look at the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and threats of the collaboration that you're potentially entering into. And of course, before starting any academic research project that may result or is planned to result in a publication, define the authorship, the credit, and have a think about the ethics of the collaboration. So before starting a collaboration, who's going to do what? How will the roles be defined? How will resources be shared? Funding, access to equipment, access to labs, reagents, and so on. What about authorship? Who goes where? We always talk about authorship prenuptial agreements, authorship prenups. In these events, you do need to have these in place before getting going on a research project to avoid any conflict or any issues later. Who's going to be the first author, the last author, and the order of the other authors on the project? So check if you have confusion about what constitutes authorship on a research paper with the fantastically acronymed ICMJE, the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, for guidelines on who should be an author on a research project. Because at the end of the day, a lot of this is about managing and minimizing the collaboration risks. So some risks time and energy, cross-disciplinary issues, international issues, conflicts over authorship and acknowledgement, copyright and or patent issues that may result from collaborations around the world. So in order to minimize risk in your collaborations as a researcher, be clear about the roles and responsibilities at the outset. Discuss this as a group, talk about this openly, treating all of your collaborators equitably and fairly, being respectful of collaborators' roles and other commitments. And that comes back to the timeline point that we made before. If you don't have the time to participate effectively, then maybe it's better to just pass on this opportunity. But as we've talked about as well already in our event today, loads of professional and research benefits of collaboration, funding opportunities, sharing of data, additional publications, your career development, as well as employment opportunities that could result from collaborations now and in the future. So with that in mind, let's move on to the third part of our event today and talk a little bit about interview skills, because you may end up talking to someone at a networking event or collaborating with somebody that could result in a job interview or an opportunity to participate in an interview process as a key component of your networking skills. What are you going to do? How are you going to manage that? How's that going to be done most effectively for your career? Well, as an academic going into an academic interview, there are a number of key things that you must do before the interview process begins. You must know the names, the titles, the research areas of the people who are going to be interviewing you. So ask for that information in advance and do thorough research on the backgrounds of those individuals before you go into the interview setting. And that means reading recent papers, looking at the work of those closest to your research area, as well as other research within the department that you're applying to join. So you will be asked in your interview about how you feel that your research will fit into the context of the department that you could be joining. So you do need to know some things about that as well. So read the papers, become familiar with the papers of those people in the department who are closest to your own research field, but also in a wider context. So have a look at the department website. Look at the staff list. Understand and gain a feel for how you would best fit in the context of this research environment. Very, very important preparation before you go into the interview. Remember, getting the interview is often the difficult bit. So congratulations on getting to that stage. It's absolutely fantastic. Go in there, revisit the job description essential criteria, talk to other people about their experiences of doing academic interviews. You must organize a mock interview within your own department, get some senior researchers, some experienced interviewers to put you through your paces, organize that mock interview, and gather plenty of evidence to support your suitability for the position. If you're being asked to do a talk as part of the interview, then that has to also be very, very carefully prepared, because of course it won't be a long presentation. Most job interviews for academic positions contain a 5 or 10 minute platform or brown bag presentation, as we like to call them. So do prepare for that thoroughly as well. And as I've already mentioned, of course, getting the interview, congratulations, that's the hardest part of the process. And you won't be in a big pool. Most academic interview processes include just a handful of candidates. So the good news, you have a chance to secure that academic position, but you're going to use your network, your collaborations now to leverage that once you're in the interview itself. Great stuff. Good news. Well done. Congratulations. Let's talk about our skills and experience, how we'll fit into the department, who we're going to work with, how we're going to collaborate, how we're going to be interdisciplinary across the university, across the research institution. And you do that by building on your previous networking and collaboration skills. You've got to know yourself, of course. You've got to go into that interview knowing what you wrote in your cover letter, knowing what you talk about on your CV. So do revisit those. I did a number of interviews when I was an academic with people who clearly had not really reread what they put in their application when they came in to the interview process, as well as knowing about the organization that you're applying for. Research that university. Be ready with questions about that university or research institute, medical school, hospital, what it does, what its values are, who it works with, what kinds of funded research grants are already in the bag at that institution. And of course, many people who come into these situations are not prepared to ask questions about the research environment. Come to the interview prepared not just to talk about how great you are and how much you'll fit in and contribute and raise the profile of that research institution, but also about where you're going to be working, asking questions as well. Super important. You will get that opportunity. You should be prepared to do that and, have some common questions ready to go, some common questions anticipated. For example, outline the project that you would undertake if you were awarded research funding at our university. Who are the key researchers in your area? How does your work compare with theirs? What advantages do you have, differences do you have over other researchers? At this institution, we are keen to develop collaborations between departments. How would you answer that? You've got to have done a great deal of research on that institution's website to adequately answer questions like this. So what opportunities for multidisciplinary research here and at other institutions does your research offer us? They will ask you. And what were the key achievements of your research so far? For example, your PhD, a current research project that you're working on. You need goals for coming into that situation, how you're going to enhance the reputation, the funding, the opportunities for students and colleagues at your new research institution. So do have a think about these kinds of interview questions as a key component of your networking skills. So let's highlight those transferable and interpretative skills. How do you brainstorm? How do you do project management? What about conflict resolution, team building, knowledge sharing? What key experiences do you have in these different areas as a researcher? Because you could get asked about these in the interview. You may wish to bring these up anyway in the interview, but these are elements of preparation for this opportunity. What plans do you have for publication of your current research? My university is keen to serve the wider community and address real-world problems. How does your planned research have potential in these areas? Okay, you've got a research grant from the European Union, but if you were starting that project again, what would you do differently? Describe a research problem you faced and how you learned from that research problem. And very importantly for all of us, if your current funding applications are unsuccessful, which chances are they could very well be, what alternatives do you have in mind? Are you looking for knowledge of that institution's funding infrastructure for that region, that country, that national area? What alternatives do you have in mind? Have you researched the funding landscape at this institution and other institutions in the area? And we would also say, a number of skills to develop when doing these kinds of interactions: eye contact, use of hand gestures, nodding, smiling. Don't overshare. Don't overuse the interviewer's name. Radiate accessibility. If you appear friendly, accessible, easygoing, a good person to work with, that will radiate well in the interview as a point of fact. Listen closely and, have a look at what the interviewers are doing as well in that face-to-face interaction. And don't forget to follow up. We always find as well that this is something that people do not do or do not do appropriately. Get a sense, of course, of how long you might be expected to wait and when you would expect to be able to get follow-up from that contact person. Don't forget to take full contact information at the interview and tailor your follow-up to ensure that you reach the key people who've talked to you in that interview experience. And, respond promptly. If you're called for follow-up, I would always ask, When can I expect to hear back from you about this process? So if they say within a week, you don't want to start sending emails the next day asking for information about what's happened. Follow up appropriately based on what you've asked in the interview and what you know to be going to happen, what's likely to happen as a next stage in that interview process. So do that as well. So, as we come to our Q&A session at the end of our event today, let's just recap what we've talked about quickly in our webinar: networking, collaboration skills, and thirdly, interview skills. Scott, how are we doing? Everything going well?
Yes, I can see some great networking happening right here in the chat. It's great to hear everyone's specialties, your research you're working on, and thanks for sharing your contact information. So I hope we can make some great connections in our event tonight. And Gareth, we have some great questions coming in as well. If you don't mind, I'll share a couple of those with you, and we'll see if we can provide some insights for our guests today. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, please. And this is an area where I would love to hear your expertise as well, Gareth, because I have questions. Here's a question from our guest. What is the eligibility criteria to get projects as a research scholar? How to promote a career in the pharmaceutical sciences? Okay, so a pharma question. This is not our field, of course, but Gareth, any thoughts on this? Getting projects as a scholar, particularly if you are in the pharma field.
Well, that's a great question. To get projects, do you mean to get projects funded or to participate in research projects? I mean, there should be no barrier to entry in terms of your participation in research projects. If you're even still an undergraduate student working in a university, it's no problem at all to write to people in your research area and ask them for research experience. We all did that. People should be doing that. So reaching out to key researchers in your local area or beyond as even an undergraduate student asking for research experience, absolutely fantastic, very highly recommended. So participating in projects at early career stages, you should be doing that. You could be doing that, just reaching out to other researchers. However, it is a different story if you are going to be applying for funding or potentially running or leading a research project. That's going to require a little bit more experience. Often that requires a PhD, maybe a faculty position in order to apply for funding. But again, very dependent on the country, the region, the territory, the research area and just being aware of all of the different things that you need to do. So, for a pharmaceutical research project, there'll be ethical considerations that need to be taken into account, maybe registration of that clinical trial before you begin. So, you need experience on that process in particular. Does that help? I hope that's an answer to the question. Great question. Do follow up with us afterwards if we can help with any specific research project questions. Scott?
Yeah, great question, and thank you. And I hope we provided some helpful information. If not, just reach out to us. You can reply to the email that goes out tomorrow, and we will be sharing the full video recording for those who are asking. You'll get the full recording. You can watch anytime. You can share with your colleagues, as many people as you like. And we'll also be sharing a certificate for everyone who made time to join us today. We thank you very much. So just check your inbox tomorrow. And if you do have any further questions, you can just reply to my email and we'll try to get an answer for you. Some questions related to the costs of promoting and networking. So one of our guests commented that financial matters at universities and funding agencies are quite complex. Indeed, they are. It's quite a bird's nest, isn't it? Another comment from our guest was that financing is a problem in the majority of conference registration fees. That certainly can be true as well. Some conferences can cost a lot of money. That's certainly true. To which another guest commented that at their conference, which is the SpectraMed conference in Tunisia, they invite keynote speakers to join the conference for free, and they only need to pay their airfare costs. That's a great system and a great solution to attract keynote speakers to your conference. So indeed, it does cost a bit, obviously, to attend things like conferences. Gareth, as someone who attends conferences, any suggestions on how to justify or offset those costs?
Well, as we've just talked about, many conferences will offer support for attendees, so it's always worth asking. reaching out to the conference organizers. Maybe you can get the registration fee waived, or you can get some conference support. But we know it's difficult. We know it's a challenge. Maybe there's funding available from your university. Maybe there's small project grants that you can apply for that support participation and travel to conferences. With that in mind, society conferences are always a great option. Maybe you should consider or could consider becoming a member of a few key academic societies within your subject area, and then those society conferences may have support, for example, for student participation, for student travel that you can apply for. But yeah, fantastic question.
That's a great question. Here's a question from our guest, Mohammed, who asks, how does strategic networking and participation in professional social forums contribute to the development of academic social capital? I guess that's the part one of that question. And I guess the part two of that question is, what mechanisms can be employed to mitigate the risks of professional fraud and social engineering in these environments? Okay, so a two-part question. So the first part, how does networking contribute to the development of academic social capital? That's a great question. Your thoughts on that, Garrett?
Yeah, because it's quite a different thing, isn't it, Mohammed, to be well networked online and have lots of followers on, I don't know, Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever, but not to actually be personally known, in a face-to-face interaction with key colleagues and collaborators. And I would say that both are important, but definitely like, getting the opportunity to talk face-to-face with leading professors, important researchers in your field is a really unique opportunity. And I think that's what you mean by social capital. I mean, people can look at your profile online and they can learn about you online. They can look at your publications. They can look at your social media. They can gain a kind of overall understanding of what you do and your research and so on. But there really is nothing like the opportunity to meet in person and make that face-to-face connection. And for that reason, we talk in this presentation about spending time in advance of attending conferences or going to academic networking events, just to have an idea of who's going to be there. And if you have an idea of who's going to be present at a conference that you might be attending, worth putting in the time to do that beforehand, of course, you can do a little bit of research. So when I meet Scott for the first time at a conference, I know what his research area is. I can have a conversation with him about some aspects of his research that creates that social capital I think that you're talking about and makes the interaction much more fruitful and rewarding for everybody. So that's a great question. On the second part, on academic fraud, I think that we would argue that pre-printing and sharing your work online on a safe, secure platform such as a preprint platform is a good idea, because then if you go and you give a presentation at a conference, a poster or a talk, the work is already available, pre-printed, and you cannot therefore be it can't be stolen. Somebody can't take your ideas and go off and write a publication. I'm not sure if that's exactly what you meant, but yeah, thanks for the great questions.
It's a fantastic question, and thanks for that, and thank you, Gareth, for sharing your insights on that. And I guess a related question, this is the question we sometimes get at our talks related to science presentation and attending conferences and speaking at conferences. And I'll try to combine some of these questions here. But how do I approach someone at a conference to suggest collaborating or working together is one question. And then I guess a related question would be, how do you start a conversation, or how do I promote myself without sounding fake? So I guess it's a two-parter. How do you promote yourself or present yourself at a conference in a genuine way? And how do you approach someone in a genuine way to make a professional connection with that person? I guess it's a combined question.
Yeah, it's really difficult, isn't it? And it's nerve-wracking, and we know that. And if you weren't nervous about doing this kind of thing, then you wouldn't be normal. I mean, it's very difficult to go up to somebody cold at a conference and introduce yourself. But let's not forget, this is not real life. This is not like the train station or the bus stop. You are at a conference, and so that's expected. That kind of interaction is expected. at academic conferences. So a senior academic or another researcher is not going to find it strange or unusual if you approach them and start talking to them about your research. And then leading on from that, of course, like after you've introduced yourself and talked about what you're doing and talked about your own research, leading on from that conversation to talk about collaboration, although maybe that could be something that happens a little bit later, perhaps over email, perhaps in follow up to that initial conversation. But what I would say in response to that question is you're going to be nervous. Of course you are, but it's an academic networking setting, a conference. And so this kind of interaction is expected. So be prepared. Have your sentences ready in your head. Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Gareth. I work at X, Y, and Z University on A, B, and C research area. Be ready to have that kind of elevator pitch, as we call it, when you approach another academic. And of course, they're going to be happy to talk to you because they're there to network as well. And of course, senior academics, whatever, are very keen, of course, to learn about what's happening in their field. We all are. So it will quickly develop into a very fruitful, friendly, and hopefully collaborative opportunity. But you've got to get over that first hurdle. Scott?
Mm. I would agree. I think that the two pieces of advice that I would give would be one, be ready to talk about yourself in brief. Have your elevator pitch ready, perhaps your most recent work or something about yourself that you would like to share with other researchers or possible collaborators. So be ready, as Gareth said, when you prepare for an interview, know yourself back to front and know what you want to present to people. You can use that same technique at a conference. The second would be if you are interested in collaborating with someone, research that person, read their most recent papers, find out more about what they're doing, and approach them with that. Use that as the focus of the conversation. Approach them and say, hey, I really love that paper that you wrote on such and such. What do you think about this? Would you be interested in exploring this together in the future as a possible research topic? Know yourself and know the person you're approaching.
Absolutely. There's nothing that a researcher will enjoy more than being approached by somebody else and being told that their recent research was great, inspiring, fantastic. I loved reading your recent paper. So that's a great tip from Scott there.
Well, I guess we're coming to the end of our event today. If we did not get to your question, we apologize. And if you have any questions that we did not answer, feel free to reach out to us by email. You'll get an email from me tomorrow sharing the full presentation with Gareth on video format that you can review anytime. You can share the video with anyone that you'd like. And we'll also share certificates for everyone joining us today because we really appreciate you taking the time to join this event on behalf of Bentham Science. We really appreciate you joining
Um,
us each time.
Follow Bentham on social media. Get in touch with the Bentham team if you're looking for a place to publish your next research paper. It could very well be a Bentham Science journal. They have more than 170 traditional journals, which of course can all be converted to full open access, as well as a range of full open access gold journals. So do have a look at benthamscience.com. Do get in touch with the team. And thank you so much, Scott. Always fantastic to do these events with you. I wish you a fantastic evening over there in Japan. Great to see so many people networking in our event today. It's been really great.
Absolutely. And speaking of networking, feel free to reach out to us, Gareth and myself. You can reply to my email tomorrow. You can find us on LinkedIn. And we thank you for joining. And thank you, Gareth, as always, for sharing your insights. I always say this, but I always learn a ton of things doing these events together with you. I can sort of sap your 30 years of experience and plant some of it into my brain. So thank you, Gareth. And thanks, everyone, for joining us today. And have a look at Bentham Science. The link is in the chat. So thanks, everyone. And thank you, Gareth.